Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. Yeah, it looks like our last episode was July of 2022. That was over a year and a half ago. Tim, do you want to share some of the things that you've had going on since July of 2022?
Well, my memory is just that last episode was really hard to do. We had just lost our fur baby, Grace, who we talked about in the intros for the episodes, just being mysteriously ill, and we didn't really know what was going on. We didn't have any idea it was going to be fatal. And after she died, things were just really hard. We were in deep grief. And at the end of that year, I left my job, my full-time job, and thanks to the generosity of donors through my GoFundMe, I was able to work on my New York Community Choir book for a year. And I was able to do 2 trips to travel for research and interviews. And I did a lot of freelance work, which just took a lot of time, and grew God's Music is My Life. My Substack newsletter, we're almost at 1,000 subscribers. And I think at the time we did the last episode, I was probably around 500 or so, something like that. And I've been doing like panels and consulting for a few documentary projects, and I've written a lot of liner notes in that time. So there's just been a lot going on. And we looked up, and you actually didn't even really believe me when I said, I think the last time we did an episode was right after Grace died. And so,
Yeah, the whole 12 months just got swallowed in my brain. Yeah.
and you've been up to a lot too. Talk about what you've been up to.
Yeah, July of 22, I would have had maybe a couple of the singles from my album were probably out at that point. I have since released the full album
You
and some
have?
other singles as well. So yeah, I just remember the second half of that year in the midst of grief, still having to do post production on that project and promote the hell out of the singles and everything that we were doing. And we ended up filming another music video, and I got some radio play, and I got a lot of great accolades for the album. So if you've heard it, thank you. Thank you for playing my record. If you haven't heard it, it is now streaming on all platforms. Believer, aka The Last Shall Be the First. And yeah, it was just kind of a whirlwind 2023. And honestly, after releasing that project, I kind of went through a bit of a crash, and not so much like a emergency, this is a bad kind of crash. It was honestly just like a reset. I found myself really relieved. I guess I say I felt really set free being able to just kind of let that project go. And after getting through that huge kind of initial wave of promotion, I found myself just unplugging. And so I have not posted a lot on social media. If you've been looking for me, it's been very few and far between, intentionally, just because I've had no energy for it, no spiritual energy for it. And I've not needed to, because I don't need to promote anything right now. I already did that. And so just allowing myself to recenter and reevaluate things, imagine what it means to be an artist, reimagine what the notion of success looks like for me as an artist, just really get a sense of how I want to be making music in this world, and what putting music into the world looks like and means in the age of TikTok and Instagram and, all these things that us artists feel like we have to do. And I just found myself really taking all of the weight and the pressure off of myself for the first time since re-embarking on a project. And so, needless to say, I've now started this year returning to songwriting, working on a few different projects, collaborating, and just exploring what music is going to be in this next phase, and really excited about it because there are absolutely no expectations other than just having fun with it, which is very, very liberating. So what that means for the state of this podcast, I think I can speak for both of us. I think we're in agreement that this is likely the last episode of Outlaw's Evidence of the Unseen. Am I right in saying that?
I think you're correct in saying that.
Yeah. And so I know that probably sounds like sad news, but I think for both of us, it probably feels like a bit of a relief, just because we both have a lot of projects going on, varying levels of priority, and keeping up with the show or trying to fit it in, it's probably been unfair to this project, and it's probably been unfair to our other projects trying to find ways to fit it in. We have gone through a number of different conversations and attempts to retool the show. We've re-envisioned it a couple of times privately. We have at one point discussed doing a new name for the show and focusing more on like discussing films and some other things. And we did a few pilot episodes. Yeah, it just, nothing really ever felt super solid. And honestly, just the time that it takes to edit each and every one of these episodes, I know I don't have it.
Well, I think the conclusion we've both come to as well is that I think when we began this project, we really thought we would connect with people who were deconstructing. I think we thought that we could have broader conversations about that process. And I think, again, I don't want to speak for you in that way, but I feel like the thing that really has stalled me in terms of wanting to continue this is that I think most people just want to be angry about what they see and hear and feel. And I feel like Outlaw's Evidence is about imagining it all differently. That's been the aim. Every episode ends with us saying, but how do you imagine it being? How do you imagine it if it were ideal? How do you imagine it if? And I just don't think the broader public is really interested in that. It's just much easier to fester in our frustration and anger. And so maybe this is just my way of saying, I'm sorry that we're not just angry.
I mean, I will say that when we first started doing this show, I honestly didn't even know if having these kinds of conversations and finding ways to create community offline were ever going to be possible again. I mean, we were in the thick of a pandemic, and we still technically are. I mean,
and we still technically are.
Folks who are immune compromised and, living with chronic illness and all those things, it's still really, really risky to live life the way we've just gone back to living life. And some of the benefits of things returning to normal is that we are kind of having some of the conversations that we were having before the podcast, that we were having through the podcast in person again. We're, doing that again. Not publicly.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think I've also found myself, how do I say this? I don't like what internet personality does to people's personalities. I don't like how I've watched people farm for engagement and the ways that they bend themselves and contort themselves to get attention online, on social media. The other podcasters that we follow, there's just a way of going about attention seeking and increasing one's numbers and being ever constantly present and consistent with content, and all the language just around pivot to video. We even explored, should the podcast be in the video form? We even filmed or, recorded some of the podcasts as videos, and all of it just felt like a pressure to fit a certain kind of maniacal way of being hyper present online that felt really, really unnatural to me.
Yes.
And I always said going into this project that I didn't want it to feel unnatural. I wanted it to casually just kind of represent the same conversations that you and I have at home all the time or with friends all the time. And the needing to stay on top of and the needing to chase numbers and chase followers and chase eyeballs and views and engagement and all of that. I watch a lot of that even among the people that we're trying to reach, the people on the left, the people deconstructing, the queer, feminist, whatever. All of it has kind of left a bad taste in my mouth just around the ways that people seek attention online. And I'm not interested in being that or doing that or participating in that. And so, if we were to talk about personal takeaways from doing the show, I guess for me, on the positive side, I feel like this is really just a start. This is just a start to a conversation. We're going to leave these episodes up at least in the indefinite. And so, maybe people will continue to find us as they search keywords like Juanita Bynum or God Warrior or whatever. But, and maybe that'll spark some interesting conversations or make some connections for people. I feel like we really just scratched the surface. We had dozens of other show subjects that we wanted to tackle and do continue to talk about privately or interpersonally, and so this idea of kind of chasing this or going about it in a public way for me has not worked. It's not something that I think I'm interested in doing, at least not right now. Who knows what life will bring? But yeah, I just kind of see these 11 episodes as, including this one, the start of a conversation. Not the full conversation, but a start. What about you?
Yeah, I think having these conversations ultimately really helped me chisel in on my focus or hone in on my focus for God's Music is My Life and the ways I wanted to approach my subjects. I didn't want to write. I've never been interested in just doing a bunch of gotcha pieces, that, get people together real quick. But I am interested in telling stories and telling complex stories, complicated stories, nuanced stories that aren't just black or white or good or bad or yes or no. Things are layered and hard. And I think it's made me really lean into that, which means my work takes longer and it means it's more thoughtful for me. So, I do have a God's Music is My Life podcast that continues, I think, many of the conversations we've started here. And so if you're interested in that, look up God's Music is My Life. You can find me on all platforms, and also, I really do urge people to pick up your album, Believer, which was, an incredibly progressive and ahead of its time work by a Black queer gospel artist. And it was named the gospel album of the year from Bob Maravich's Journal of Gospel Music. And I think that that's a huge statement, that your album was at the top of the list, despite the fact that you broke all the rules. And so I really think it's important that people find that. And that album really is an extension of the work that we've done here as well. So that's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're both continuing the work of this podcast in other avenues. So yeah, continue to follow us. Definitely subscribe to the God's Music is My Life podcast. I don't even know where you'll be able to find me. I'm in all the same places. I'm just not posting as much. So if you want to reach out. But that said, this is the last episode and this one's important. And I knew I wanted to make sure we saw this episode through for a number of reasons. We're talking about a film that I think is really, really important. It's so just the minute we turned the movie on the first time we watched it, we said, oh, we absolutely have to do an episode on this because it just encompasses, it's like the thesis of the show, really, all the topics that this film covers. Of course, this is Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. Movie came out in 2022. So what you're going to listen to is our second attempt at doing this conversation. We originally recorded this conversation with our guest, Juba Kalamka, in October of 2022, and we couldn't get through the entire movie. I think we were just kind of attempting to do a little too much with it, and so we did the second attempt at this conversation last August. We were trying to re-envision the show at the time, and so it kind of ended up being caught up in the mix of us still trying to figure out what we were going to do with the podcast, which was ultimately just calling it a day, but wanting to see this episode as the finale of sorts. And so this is our first time having a guest, which was really, really cool. I loved bringing in a third voice to the show and had hoped to start doing that more in the future. And I just think it's a really, really great conversation. You may hear I've attempted in this episode to try to remove any aspects of the conversation that dated in August of 23 versus now in March of 2024 because it was recorded so many months ago. But I might have missed some things. So just keep that in mind in case you hear something and it's like, wait, that happened months ago, not last week or whatever. This is recorded a few months ago, but we're happy to finally be able to present it to you and see this off as the last episode of the show. Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all.
Thank you.
Any final words, Tim?
Keep the faith.
All right, let the theme song play.
I renegade through and through. I renegade through and through. Oh, Lord, if you only knew. Now tell me, what do I do? And if what I say is true, how could I get through to you? I don't know how to behave. I don't know how to behave. And if I don't change my ways, it might send me to my grave. But if what I say is bad, maybe we could all be saved.
Welcome to Outlaw's Evidence of the Unseen, exceptional stories and conversations that weave history, religion, arts, and politics into the fabric of our greater cultural narrative. I am Ray Curenton, singer, songwriter, and recording artist, I guess, producer. Go ahead, Tim.
I am Tim Dillinger, music writer and historian.
If you like the show, be sure to subscribe and tell everyone you know to tune in as well. And if you feel so inclined, please rate and review the show wherever you're listening. This helps more people find us. And today we are talking about Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, which I've had a little trouble figuring out how to categorize. I'm going to go with, it's a dark comedy with probably about half of the film is mockumentary. Released in 2022, directed by Adamma Ebo, stars Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown. Tim, what is Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul about?
The tele-evangelical megachurch complex, in short.
In short, yes. about a preacher who has a little bit of a scandal, rocks the church, rocks the community of Atlanta. And they solicit a film crew, it sounds like, to try to rehabilitate their image as they prepare to reopen the church for Easter Sunday. And hilarity / trauma ensues. I don't know. And I'll just note that the film is produced by Ebo's twin sister and producing and creative partner Adamma Ebo. It's also produced by Daniel Kaluuya and executively produced by Jordan Peele's Monkey Paws Productions. So a lot of innovative, this kind of new Black Hollywood folks in the kitchen here seeing this film through. It was nominated for 7 Black Reel Awards, including Outstanding Actor, Outstanding Actress, Independent Film. It also got a couple of NAACP Image Awards, which I was surprised to see nominations for both Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown. So it at least got that. I'm kind of shocked that it did, because
Same.
I was expecting this film to just be completely snubbed, just given how controversial it was, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we do, Tim, do you want to introduce our guest? We've got a guest today.
Sure. I'm thrilled today that my longtime friend, Juba Kalamka, is with us. He is most recognized for his work as co-founder and producer of homo hip-hop group Deep to Collective, the DDC, which is sort of how I first heard him, and for his development of the micro-label Sugar Truck Recordings. His cultural work and writing centers on intersectional dialogues on race, identity, gender, disability, sexuality, and class in popular media. He served 6 years as a music columnist, book reviewer, and features writer for Color Lines magazine, which is also how I met him. Kalamka lives in Oakland with his partner of 20 years, their daughter, a neurotic standard poodle, and an enthusiastically territorial rescue dog. We have one of those too. Son of Byford is his first book.
Thank you both.
Thoughts initially about this film, how you came about it, and I want to ask, all three of us this question, and then kind of, what kind of changed from those initial thoughts watching the film the first time and then watching it this latest time. How has the thoughts about the film shifted? What new things did you kind of notice about the film in this latest round?
Well, it's funny how I first became familiar with the film was that I was walking actually through the Mission District in San Francisco, and since I've been living since like '99, I've been living in the Bay Area, but in Oakland. But like something that you see walking through a lot of the Mission in San Francisco is there'll just be walls with giant either music promotional or movie posters that'll be on walls. And it's like in one of the posters I saw the other day was these giant posters of Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall that said "Honk for Jesus," on it. And I'm like, I was just like, what the hell? Wow. I'm like, what is this? So the first chance I had, I went to look, and to see what it was, and was just like, oh, damn. I have to watch. I have to watch this.
They're actually going to do that in a movie.
Wow. It's I was like, wow. And again, some of what we talked about was first, and I've had a lot of these conversations with Tim about this, about my experience growing up in Chicago, an Afrocentrist nationalist community, which despite its vociferous protestations over the years is deeply culturally and particularly hegemonically Christian in some of the way that it's informed, and also just the sort of really kind of unavoidable cultural Christianity I grew up in the community I grew up in Chicago. I'm a first generation Northerner, if you will, and grew up in the North Lawndale neighborhood, which was a Jewish ghetto that became a Black ghetto later during the Great Migration. Just church community being, even I was not a church goer because my parents were not. That was just really foundational to community, community, and moving to the Austin neighborhood on the far west side. And in the Austin neighborhood, I grew up. I moved there when I was about 4, so grew up across the street. My grandmother lived in it. I had grandmothers and cousins all who owned homes in that neighborhood, and my grandmother lived directly across the street from Christ Tabernacle Church. So the Tommies and Reverend Milton Brunson. So it was by the time I was probably 11 or 12 years old when I understood what Christ T was and the space that Christ T held in community. I actually in larger national and international community, just about people's awareness of it and its influence.
Yes.
And so it was just it became particularly interesting for me, and just in a way where that I have never shied away from the ways that that horticultural frame has informed and shaped my life in some good ways and some difficult ways, but in always some really interesting ways. So I didn't grow up in the house, so to speak, but there's a lot of that I saw being again across the street from the house.
Mm-hmm.
And but if you're talking about Chicago, you're talking about Chicago church community, Jubilee Showcase, which
That's
is
right.
something I watched, that I watched religiously, no pun intended, on Sunday mornings because I just like I wanted to see music live and see live music and see
Yes,
black people doing live music in a
that's
similar
right.
way to watching Soul Train. I think also, but I think what I had not experienced and did not understand at the time was the context of the sort of post civil rights movement, class ascendancy, Ebony magazine, whatever how was documenting that of middle class and upper middle class African American community, and also the development of media in the 70s of cable and attendantly religious cable shows, and particularly Christian cable
Mm-hmm.
shows. So the reach and the spread and the particulars around the expansions of that in the ways and parts that enabled the expansion of the actual physical expansion of the church. And there's the megachurch in the white Christian main, but seeing the shapes on that took in terms of black churches and black church communities that were already sizable and what that meant. So like and what that meant to have eyes, if you will, on what you're doing, and it's not just a church thing, but just in general, eyes on what you're doing, and what I think that was the in your notion of what those eyes can see, what they should be seeing, and also your notions, the notions that people have around the way that they can
Mm-hmm.
control. Like when you're talking about power, the ideas that people have around how they control or can or cannot or should be able to control narratization around what they are doing and what they are not doing. If that's about how much money they have or about their notions of themselves in the holy holy or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
have you about that. So that's the baseline for me about what I was seeing in this. If I had to say one thing about that was different about the first time, it was I think that there was an easy way if you talk about the general public and people who might have been problematized to it to dismiss it as simple spectacle and as simply having their as a easy stick in the eye, if you will, but just the density
Mm-hmm.
and the onion that this movie is is still. I think that
Yes,
I watched it 3 times. I could probably watch it 10 more times and see something else that I have not seen,
Absolutely.
did not seen before.
completely agree.
Absolutely. Tim, what about you?
Well, like Juba, in a sense, when I came into the Black holiness experience at 14, and so we're talking the early
Mhm.
90s at that point. And so what in my experience where I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, we did not see a lot of bleed over from Christian television into our environment. There was actually, where I was, a lot of skepticism about what the white folks were doing on Christian TV, which was really refreshing for me. And so there was a lot of distance. And so I remember, like, talking with people because we're just a few years at that point after the Jim and Tammy Baker scandal.
Mhm.
And there was some sympathy towards Jim and Tammy, basically saying, like, I don't believe they did all of that. I don't believe it was that bad. But culturally, there was not bleed over. That was not the. I didn't start witnessing bleed over until a few years later when Rod Parsley became a phenomenon out of Columbus, Ohio. And Rod Parsley had, in his own way, brought enough of a black element into what he did to make it relatable in a way that Jim and Tammy did not, in a way that Paul and Jane Crouch did not. And so that was really, and then shortly after Rod Parsley came Paula White. And so those were the two pieces I saw where the black church started to be affected by Christian television. But I know regionally, in like conversations with John P. Key, a gospel artist, he personally witnessed the ways that where he was in North Carolina, which is also where Jim and Tammy Baker were, Christian television did change the black church there. And so I know regionally there's going to be different relationships with how those things happen. So all that to say, when I watched Honk for Jesus, I was tickled because it did not feel like a parody. It actually felt like what I feel like when I watch Christian television today. It did not feel that different from I don't want to name names because I'll get in a lot of trouble. But when I see Christian television today, it looks just as comedic and just as parody-ish as this film is alleged to be. And so I think how true to life it was what has, each time I've watched it, become more real for me. And I think the biggest thing that changed for me between the first time and the last time today was that I initially had a lot more sympathy for Trinity. I had a lot of empathy for Trinity. And when I watched it today, I didn't have anything for her. I actually had a lot more sympathy for Lee Curtis and compassion for where he was, because I actually saw her anger, which is understandable. I understand why she was angry. Mm-hmm. But I also understand at the same time that she was angry, she wasn't even angry at being portrayed. She was angry at not having the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because that was her specific demand, was that I get back up on that stage. So my relationship, my compassion meter completely changed from the first time to the last time. What about you, Ray?
Yeah, I first caught wind of this film, like many things these days, because I'm just not really tapped in anywhere else, on Twitter, where I think I was seeing like two things going on. I was seeing the people kind of saying, oh, like, y'all, they're doing this. Like, this is what they're actually doing with this film. This is kind of huge. And then, like, on the other hand, I was seeing stories of church groups going to this film because it wasn't marketed in ways that were very honest, I think, about what people were walking into. And I don't know if, the people who I named earlier, the directors, the producers, had any control over how it was, marketed in terms of distribution and all of that. But I think people thought they were getting something else. And so they were going to the theaters. And this is like, theaters were just kind of opening. And so people were, really kind of just getting back into the swing of doing that kind of thing. And this was not the film for the church ladies groups or whatever to go and see. And so getting those stories of people outraged that this film was happening, and this is just not what you do, seeing that kind of thing. You don't tell this kind of business. Is that how you, all of that, and just kind of going, yeah, we need to see this. We need to see this movie. And I think in my first watch, I was just kind of blown away at the authenticity piece of it. Yes, we are going to show these pastors cussing. We are going to show these people being as opulent and as gloaty and all of that. Like, we're going to absolutely show it, and no holds bar on all of that. And just kind of going, wow, we're really getting this from Black filmmakers.
Yes.
That's great. That's good. Because usually you get little moments, little, blips in like a Martin Lawrence movie or something like that, a little hint, a little nod, a little church scene. But to have this be the whole film, I was like, wow, yeah, this is pretty awesome. And yeah, on a repeat watch, or on this latest watch, I agree, Tim, and I hate going like, yeah, I didn't have sympathy for the woman, but I actually did kind of have some compassion for the man. But I will say Lee Curtis's menace was so strong in my, like, that was what I caught on first. Just seeing, the look behind his eyes and all of that, and just kind of going, oh, this man's sick. Like, this man is really crazy. And I still got that, but I did see greater glimmers of his humanity in this rewatch that I didn't before, and that kind of surprised me a little. That did surprise me. So let's talk about these people, Trinity and Lee Curtis. What do we think about them?
I think that's interesting. I mean, about that, like in the second watch, I think that, like, if you're talking about that, about his menace, I think there's a way that I saw from the beginning. I think the shape of that I did not see if on my first couple of watches until probably a third of the way through the movie. I think that I caught on to at the very beginning. But also I caught his despair and his sadness and not just simple sadness, but misery, really, that I'm just meaning from the opening shot of the Black Jesus, you know, and if it was just the diametric between the dreadlocks, you know, and the completely straight beard. That was there. That really, like, and this is me. This is my art school graphic design craft. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Craft that was just like the idea of this this was a white Jesus that we spray painted and put some dreadlocks on and combed some gradation through some brown gradation formula through the beard. And this was a staff project, if you will. Or just even also too, that was just disturbing about it too, was the hands, his hands out, you know, and him having been, you know, I'm guessing the implications of him having been resurrected, but the hands with holes in them with no blood, or no indication that there had been any blood or that there had been any crucifix. They're just simple holes in the hands. So the implication for me, just as an object, was just as opposed to just simple crucifixion, that what that meant, just representatively what exsanguination would be. That just like the whole Christ is risen, but like the blood, like there's no serum, there's no fluid, there's nothing, no life that is there. And I accept that is just my personal reading, you know, of that related to the the construction, you know, of that. But that just, I think that one of the things that I saw about him, and from the beginning, like when they go back into the closet, the giant closet.
Yep.
be that a intentional or unintentional metaphor, and or the hems of all of his garments. If you will, you know, the coats of many colors. You know, they were playing with so much different stuff in a way that you can read, and you don't have to be a churchgoer, that you can read as somebody who has some context, a cultural context of Christianity, particularly a cultural context of Black Christianity. But I just had this weird vision that popped into my head of him, like, just sort of going around showing all of his shoes and showing all of her clothes, shoes and her clothes. I just had for a moment a vision of him putting all of those shirts and all of those suit jackets on at the same time. Like, as ridiculous as that sounds. But really, what was it like? I want to be seen, but I don't want to be seen at the same time.
Yes.
And that's how this is going to be, you know, dude. I want to be seen, but I want to be seen. I want to be a spectacle, but I don't want you to see me.
I want to be seen the way I want you to see me.
Yeah, seen. And I think about that. I had a friend and colleague, Alan Skinner, who produced the documentary Pick Up the Mic. Alan Skinner passed away, and he said something to me when we were in the production of that back in 2006. He talked about documentaries, he described people in documentaries as, or just people, period, essentially walking around all day as if they had 300 like mirrors attached to their body, like if you had a rear view mirror that they've adjusted the way that they want to have them adjusted to see themselves. And that what a documentarian comes in and does is just grabs one of the mirrors maybe and goes like that with it, and then they go, whoa, that's not how I see my, that's not how I see my self. But I think that the part of that too is about the lack of relationship and the power dynamic and the slippage around the understanding of people. And I saw this with people who I've been in documentaries with, are now understanding documentarians as artists, as opposed to people who are at your beck and at your service, who are shaping a story from pieces, and how they're taking what is there. And I think that was a lot of what that, and that goes back to what you're saying about the stage and Trinity's relationship to the stage, or the staging, if you will, as well. Attended to,
yes,
like parallel to him, or just next to, in concert with Lee.
Well, I think yes, because my thought was too, and Ray caught this when we were watching it this last time, and I missed it. Was that the documentarian in the film? There's a scene where the young man who was incarcerated comes to him while he's outside and he's practicing his sermon.
Montarius West.
Thank you.
Is his name.
So when he came up and they started having that exchange, the filmmaker was not filming that. The filmmaker comes up as they embrace and only got the embrace.
The hug.
They only got the hug and the face pat.
Right.
And so it was like the documentarian was seeing that through a particular lens based on also what had just happened prior with the sound guy. Right. And so, yes, it's very much about documentarians also only being able to be responsible for what they see. And so they didn't have all the context on that conversation to know it wasn't the same conversation. So all that to say, like, I feel like Lee Curtis is like deeply complex and complicated, as is she. They were actually unclear about the filmmaker's role because they actually thought it was a beck and call kind of thing, and they could just call
a PR thing.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, stop. You can stop now. You can stop filming now. We need 15. We need 15, and they're like, no, we're gonna keep filming because that's what we came to do.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
This is about your product, or your notion of what your product is.
Yes. I mean, the sound exchange, and I didn't catch this until we watched today too. The exchange with the sound guy that he hits on, their mics were on.
But they weren't rolling. Right.
Right.
Yes.
The mics were on. So the wife actually heard that whole exchange.
Wow.
And that's why when she came in, she had that edge because she had heard that. And he says it. He realizes it when the guy basically rejects him. He even says out loud something to the effect of, and the mics have got to get cut off. The mics have got to get cut off. And so but it's so subtle. And I think that's what's brilliant about this film is you actually do have to watch it over and over and over to really pick up on what is the public possibly going to see and what are we only getting to see, as the audience of this mockumentary. And so you're really having to catalog, like, what was the filmmaker getting? What were they not getting? And so there's, all of those dynamics. It's fascinating. It was just fascinating.
Yeah. One of the things I did on this watch was I had seen, I think on IMDb or somewhere, that you can tell what's documentary and what isn't based on the aspect ratio, the change in the aspect ratio by shot. And I hadn't noticed that. And so I said, well, when we're watching this time, I really want to key in on that. And it really helped me contextualize why certain scenes were there. And also in moments where it's all happening at once, like in the big blow up with one of the victims and he gets out of the car, it's bouncing back and forth. And so you're getting the version of it that's like, well, this is kind of behind the scenes, but then you're also getting the angles happening from the documentarian's point of view. And there's so many things I know I missed, just in getting up or turning my head or, looking down to make notes, just individual shots that were creative choices where it's cueing you in on this is documentary, this is not, and how to interpret that, which could, open up all kinds of different interpretations.
I'm immediately given to think that, like, what the difference I'm sad that I didn't get to see this in a theater.
Hmm.
And not just about watching and having nothing to do with audience response or anything about that, but just being about just the stuff I think that I might have seen in the immediate or what it meant to see just this, like the actual physical spectacle of film and the theatrical of the spectacle. That it being a very different visual and cognitive and emotional experience to watch that on film in a theater on a big ass screen as opposed to watching it on television, because it's just like I made a point of just like I've been watching it. I watched it again on a laptop, and so made a very point to like watch it and pay attention very slowly, because I knew that there were things that I might not see if I had watched it in my living room versus having watched it in a theater. But immediately there was a way that I saw, like, I think there was stuff that I picked up. I think this was the last thing I picked up about this part. About two things about Lee Curtis was one, when he's talking to Arya, I think the Sapphire and the mom and the daughter Arya, what
Yes.
their context was for him that I didn't see, and I'm like, immediately there was aside, like, because a lot of this is of what is captured around this is hit, like the scandal with regard to him having sex and having relationships with these young men, and exploiting these young men. But immediately, what I saw about him was just that, like, what came up for me was People's Church. Was really what started thinking about People's Church and thinking about the particulars of sexual exploitation in those contexts, in that an exploiter is an exploiter, and a power, and somebody's power. So there might have been a directionality around his sexuality, and him having an interior understanding of that. But I think that the idea of a relationship to sexual fluidity around that is, there's an uncomfortable conversation around that, just with relative to understanding the idea of particulars of sexual congress and connection as power. So immediately when I saw the space of, again, in the aspect ratio and the framing, immediately there was a space of like, is this child Arya? Is this Lee Curtis's child?
I wondered the same thing.
That came up for me, or just even whether that was intentional or not, or maybe this is red car stuff for me about, while Sapphire is speaking in her name first, that's another whole different conversation about Sapphire and Arya's name too, but also Sapphire, about Arya. While Sapphire is talking, Arya is ascending, and in this distracted context. So like, that's when I say about my red car stuff, there's my red car stuff about my own neurodivergence and wondering about that and seeing myself in Arya's character, and then Arya saying later at the end of it, after the whole laying of hands and all of that,
the speaking of tongues
and all that stuff,
the dancing, the singing,
and Arya just goes into the camera, and I hadn't caught this before. Just goes, "I just love the theater."
Yes.
And I was just like, I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
And then I think it was after that he goes, and just the sort of deliberateness of and this is like the capstone of that for me, the deliberateness of Lee Curtis, of his strip in front of the 5 congregants.
Yes.
And going into and when Trinity takes him into the
baptistry.
To baptism but it's in the back, and it's like, and they're only getting to see what that symbolically, what that meant, that they're only getting to see their heads, and a piece of that, relative. So like, and how that sets up.
So how unnecessary it was for him to strip. Yes. And I really did notice in this rewatch also the ways in which Lee Curtis repeatedly uses his body as either a signal or really just a way to get attention, a way to feel, adored or whatever. Go ahead, Tim. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say there's also some symbolism to the fact that we could only see his head, because what I thought immediately was neck down dead.
I'm sorry.
Neck down,
Neck
dead.
down. Oh, neck down. Yes. 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 Yeah.
Which would also explain why he would just, I'm just going to strip now. Or on the basketball court. Yeah, I'm just going to take off my clothes. That's what you do when you start making your move. Speaking of the stripping, I think it's important to also talk about the sex scene that we get, which is one of the things that are not documentary or mockumentary in this film. One of those scenes, again, where I went, oh yeah, they're really doing this. And yes, this is why the church folks were big mad when they saw this in the theater or whatever. Because you don't do that. You don't go into pastor's bedroom. That just never happens.
Or how you make the audience the documentarian at that moment,
right,
in a way that they don't want to. Way that they don't want to, especially because it's like, I think that what I'm hearing, part of what you're saying around this is that no, you don't do that. No, you don't capture that. But at the same time, that is in your head all the time. That is there.
Right.
That is there all the time. And what that meant for a lot of the audience to have that put on whatever the shape of that was, to have that put there on the screen.
It moves it from something I unconsciously think about to something I am now responsible for thinking about, because you have put it in front of me and given it dialogue.
Right.
Yeah. And those are two very different things.
And now I can't imagine what I, believed, their relationship was like, or their sexual dynamics are like. Now I'm actually getting the full picture of it, and it's not pretty, and it's not glorious, or it's, it's challenged. It's
definitely not.
It's got a lot of.
Well, it made me think about, and I can't recall the name. I mean, I think that's ultimately not important in that, but I think it wasn't quite a year ago that a video of a pastor who is well known in whatever his context is. There's a video on Pornhub and on Xhamster of this late 50ish, early 60ish preacher, giving, vociferous head to a woman who is not his wife. And it was really interesting about like watching people's responses to it on just sort of if it was TMZ or what Madame Noir or what, any of those kind of sites who had stills up of it with smiley faces in front of or whatever, and watching people's response in a similar way, that what their response was largely what the response I saw to it was not that people were problematized by his infidelity, but they were problematized by the notion of it having been captured.
That's right.
Captured and released, if you will.
That's right.
And if you and also too understanding that, given the context of, again, the documentation, that the context of the shot is obvious that it's a point of view shot, so that the woman who he's having sex with is actually shooting that from a camera, like from a camera phone. It's clear that that's what it is. So there's a space of, I think, of people's discomfort who commented on it about the deliberateness of both of them. Like, both of them were doing it. And I don't know necessarily, of course, that if he intended for that to become public, but it's just like, if it's on somebody else's capture, that's out of the room. That's in somebody else, and but also too, maybe that possibly that was a part of that for his relationship to that, and similar to the relationship in this movie is that, like, it doesn't matter that this is happening, where it's happening, and I'm and somebody else has the camera, that I'm the preacher and I am the power and I am the embodiment. So therefore, just implicitly, if not explicitly, I control the narrative, and that I can trust that there's a space in which that my relationship to that will be respected and adhered to. That I don't even have to dialogue to speak forth about that.
The other thing I've really noticed in this rewatch was at the start of the sex scene. And honestly, through the whole thing, the inability to name sexual acts
Yes.
and what we're doing and making requests explicitly, you know, by calling things what they are. I think the Trinity says, "I thought we might try it the regular way tonight." You know, and, you know, when he's like flipping her over and she's like, wait, could we, you know,
Can we not?
can't we just do missionary, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever position she wanted.
She wanted to
and
see
I
his
think,
face. That's what she
Exactly.
wanted. She
Yeah.
wanted to see his
Exactly.
face.
Yeah.
yeah. And even his request to, you know, give him head or,
Yeah.
you know, it's just, can you just do that thing or whatever he
Right.
says. It's all very unnamed. It's all very not described, which is just so church people. That's just so church
And
people.
I think what's interesting about that, I'm glad you said that way, but like, cause like, I mean, it's just like, remember like how we're talking about the slippage of what is being documented and what is not, that there's no camera at
Right.
that moment and you still.
Exactly. You could say whatever. Y'all, we know y'all say the F word, you know, we know y'all say whatever. Yeah.
Film, you're in your bedroom, you know, and the power of that notion, you know, that, you know, if it's God is watching, you know, or whatever that people's relationship to that is, like, you're in your bedroom and
Yes.
it's only the two of you and you still, you know, you still can't name it and what it means, even in that space for you to, what that would mean for you to name name whatever it is that you're naming, you know, whatever it is that you're naming in that space. And you don't, and you can, and you have the freedom to do so, but you don't.
And what else? Yeah. What other things then are you not naming and you're not
Right.
saying, which we know there's a
A
lot.
lot.
We know there's a lot of things that they're not willing to speak, not willing to name. I do want to just touch on the usage of hip hop in this movie because I forgot that the film opens with "Pop in My Collar," 3-6 Mafia.
Yes.
But of course, I did remember the whole "Nuck If You Buck" crime mob moment in the car scene in the middle of the film. The big takeaway that a lot of people get from it, other than her and the clown makeup later at the end of the film, is, you know, them rapping to this song, and that talks about both of the actors not knowing the song before and having to learn it specifically for the scene, and just thinking about those two instances of hip hop. I'm not sure if there's others. I think maybe there's maybe some hip hop playing in the car before, what's his name, Khalil, the one of the victims, gets out of the car. I think those are like maybe the only times you're hearing hip hop music in the film. But it seems important that, you know, clearly those were choices, and what, you know, what's behind those choices, what's the meaning of those choices.
That struck me in the beginning of the film in a way that it did not at first. And I think a part of that too is just like you're saying, the way the development and the access of media, and I think in the first way because you hear rap records and hip hop in movies all the time now, in a way that you did not in the 1980s, you know, say, or the late 1980s, but that it's just ubiquitous, you know, it's the language, you know, now in this particular kind of way. But I mean, I think, and I was not specifically familiar with that record at the time that I first saw the movie, nor, you know, now I didn't know who the artist, you know, was, but I could hear the lyrics of it, and it kind of slapped me in the head, you know, like,
right.
like in the way that you're saying, this was a pointed choice, very, very,
Yes.
about this, this conversation, and a perfect one, the big pimpishness of it, of what it was, of what it was getting to, of it, what it was getting to, just, and not necessarily as an immediate indictment, you know, of that, but just like, this is what is happening, regardless of what your feelings are, you know, about this. This is what you're watching, or what that would mean for them to watch this film that we're watching afterwards, for Lee Curtis and Trinity to watch that, like, as the opening of this narratization of what their of their lives and of this particular experience.
Yeah, and I mean, there's such a historic rift, which feels really one-sided to me, the Black church has with hip hop culture, what it represents, the messaging that it, you know, is sending to our kids, and how it's, you know, such a destructive force in our communities. And yet at the same time, you know, in both of those songs, Pop in My Collar, Nuck If You Buck, clearly the similarities of what those cultures are, or at least the image that is being sold in those songs and that kind of commercialized, capitalistic version of hip hop. The grandeur, all of that, and just kind of going, yeah, of course Enough If You Buck would be a hype song for these kinds of people who hold these politics, who are moving through the world in this way, who see community or their role in the community as, they may say it's one thing, but act this way. I think really seeing it really, are we just fighting for eyeballs? Is that really all it is? Fighting for money, fighting for, the attention of folks, and mad that hip hop's winning that fight?
Well, I think that the issue with hip hop is actually aging out. Because I don't see it so much in younger pastors and younger congregations. I actually see the two genres, if you will, hip hop and church culture, coalescing with each other very differently. And so, borrowing these ideas of, blessed being equatable with bling, that this is very much the way these two worlds that are allegedly quite separate are actually quite intertwined with each other. And so, the decadence of the pastors and the decadence of the artists aren't that far apart or different, which is why we see Christian hip hop becoming more of a thing today than we did many years ago, because the bravado, the braggadocio is exactly what these younger pastors are presenting and normalizing to
the promise of prosperity, the promise of fame.
It's all about
notoriety.
It's about money. It's about winning. If I hear one more song about winning, I'm just going to vomit.
Yes.
I don't want to win. I don't want to win at all. I don't want to. And so that's, this is, I thought they captured that brilliantly in this film, and I thought that's what those scenes were about.
I think that what comes up for me when you say that is just like I talk about having grown up in Afrocentrist, Kwanzaa-ist, Black nationalist community, and this is like the same kind of separation between church community and that particular cultural space, whereas like Black nationalism and Kwanzaa and that kind of stuff would be hip hop. In this instance, in my experience of that in the 70s, even though you can map, because it's the same, it's really ultimately the same people, who came out of church, went downstate to college and came back with an afro, kind of thing, kind of experience of that. And I heard it, and I'm using, that's not a phraseology that I made up. I heard that, in community, just about the overlap of the idea of the understanding that fundamentalism is fundamentalism, hegemony is hegemony.
Come on,
all of it is it's the different set of markers, but it's also, if you understand, like a Marcus Garvey, for example, as deeply a deeply fundamentalist Christian. Who hated jazz, out of his mouth that jazz was a Jewish conspiracy. There's all kinds of stuff, about it that mirrors and maps the kind of stuff that if you talk about in the genesis and growth of hip hop that you heard church people say about rap music, but then you get to now, and it's a thing, and in a way that, for example, that like how jazz was hip hop in 1935 or 1940, just in terms of the overculture's relationship to it, and like church community's relationship to it, very much. But now it's cultural canon in this particular way, where you have Christian jazz, artists, who do Christian, Christian, music, in the same way that you have Christian hip hop, artists. So understanding it just across time is eventually the understanding of it as, if not understanding it as the same, like mirrored kind of on top of each other kind of tropes, but ultimately understanding as a tool in the context of the ultimately capitalist imperatives of a lot of it, that it's something that's usable in the same, kind of way that people will, that people will figure it out. I think it's the Clark sisters, as an aside, who did a record with Melly Mel.
Yeah, computers rule the world, but
Yes,
God is still in
I
control.
knew that one of you would know. One of you would know that.
It's always going to be Tim who gets it quicker.
One of you didn't know that record, and I remember seeing it at the time, and just being. I guess I must have been 18 or 19 years old when that came out, but being just jarred by the idea of them, of them being in the same room. But even though they probably might not have been in the same room when it was recorded, but that's another story. But because we know how that goes. But yeah, just the idea, of it, in this, in this way, or the way that's unspoken. Like, I mean, I think about the BB and CC Winans Heaven is one of my favorite records, not one of my favorite Christian records, one of my favorite records ever. Yeah. But it's an electro hip hop record with church singing, on top of it. That's just amazing. I listened to just the dub version of it, the instrumental version of it, just to listen to it as a piece of, just as a piece of music. But there was never any conversation at the moment. Anyway, I didn't see any conversation about the dynamics of that. There's just the space of understanding that as a tool.
Well, I think, even raising the Clark sisters and Melly Mel is an interesting thing, because the thing that also stood out to me in watching this film this time is how little grounding Lee Curtis and Trinity actually have in any real message or belief. The real grounding is all about perception, how people perceive them, and they will do or say what they have to be perceived correctly. But it is not out of any sense of personal conviction.
And that's so real. I think of so many people in the church that I know, people I meet in the church on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, and go, yeah, they're one of those. It's just doing church, doing God, doing, whatever. But what's the meat of it, I couldn't tell you. They couldn't tell you.
And I don't know if I didn't hear any real conversation about that. And I think the only thing we really got that they believed in was their own perception of blessings coming from being perceived correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what, and I think that's a part of what is, in a very real way, is being exploited in the sense that, whether like you said, whether the congregants understand that or not, that is a very real thing, to want to be seen.
Yes.
Just period, just to want to be seen, just to want to be acknowledged, just to want, but to want, to want validation in that way. But what happens when, like both of you have been saying about that, about the idea of perception and being able to control that perception being somehow the makings of personhood.
Yes.
When it's, when it's not. It's like you can get somebody, if you set something on fire and shake, you get somebody to look, do all kinds of things to get people to look, to pay attention. But that doesn't, but how that doesn't make it anything of substance. And you don't have to, and the only thing that you have to believe, or not even saying you have to believe necessarily, but the only thing you have to know is that you want to keep somebody's eyes.
That's right.
On you in that moment.
Yeah.
What can I do in this moment to get the eyes trained on me?
Which also I think is a great way to kind of hit towards the ending point, because
all these roadside scenes that we get, which really undo all of it for both of them.
But that it climaxes with him ultimately telling her to do the praise miming and to put on her clown face ultimately and go out there and mime on the street to Never Would Have Made It by Marvin Sapp. And that it climaxes with his accuser coming and the shot of her with her clown face standing next to him and Black Jesus, as a trinity, I thought was really symbolic.
And he's laughing at all three.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and and I think that was like, I mean, if you go back, like when we were talking at first, well, like my first notion of like awareness of the movie was the clown face. What the poster was, I think, was the clown was her in the
Oh
coat.
wow.
So I'm in the mission, and there's just this honk for Jesus, save your soul, and it's like, I'm like, is that Regina Hall? Like I'm like, wow, that is like whoa, and just going like, what the hell is it? Like, what the hell is this? I mean, it was great as far as marketing, because it made me like,
Yes.
I'm like,
Stops you. Yeah.
it literally stopped me in my tracks, like while I was walking down the street. Whereas most of the time those posters are just a blur, But that was just like, because it was a poster where her head is 5 feet tall, essentially, on this poster, on this, like on a boarded up building,
Yes.
or something like that, and just me being like, what? But also, I think about that too, about the end was that struck me again, was the still space of him having been confronted with all this trauma that he fomented, that he participated in, his continuation of doing that, and it made me interested in what happened when the credits roll, what was going to happen after the credits roll, because I keep, like you're saying, laughing at the spectacle, laughing at these people, laughing at Black Jesus, like spray paint Black Jesus doll, and laughing at her, and the way that it was, the shot, for me anyway, the way that the shot was done, is that watching him in his slick boy mode, contemplating what his next move,
Yes.
is after all of that, and it's as if she isn't there while he's talking. For me, it was like she was just, because his focus is out at the what's the next move, and her as the last shot, and just the brilliance of her acting with her face. That was just, that was sad, that was heartbreaking, but that was chilling at the same time, because my expectation in the look on her face when the camera goes to credits was that, is she going to kill him? Like, in this like, when is that going to happen? When is something?
She said, "I would sooner kill him than leave him," is what she told the director.
Exactly. And it was like, I think that was why that came back. And and it was just like, and the look on her face was like, yeah, I'm gonna kill him.
Yeah.
Well, and sorry, Juba. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
The articulation of her recognizing that him having her do the praise mime was, in her mind, the ultimate degradation.
Yes.
Because when she said the praise mimers are a sideshow,
And I've been reduced
to this. And I was like, well, I'm glad somebody finally articulated this for all the people who think they have some big ministry as praise mimers out there. Like, be clear about who you are in the infrastructure, because
and what the perception of you is from the leadership.
From some of us in the seats, to be clear, because I have never enjoyed the praise miming ministry. It is just a big waste of my time.
But I think that also too, that like, to give you some context from my context of it, of not being in the building, I didn't understand that praise miming was a real thing. That was some shit that they made up.
No, this is a real bona fide thing.
Oh yeah,
and ribbon dancing and stuff. But I thought that was a joke at first when I first saw it. I didn't understand that was real. I was like, when I found out, I'm like, oh shit, that was real.
Yeah.
Really?
And why? Yeah.
Chest pains.
But how, like, but saying that, like, acknowledging that as a sideshow, as a literal sideshow.
Yes.
That she had always, I think that was a moment of truth. And she'd always been a sideshow.
Always.
The first lady is a sideshow of a particular, in a particular performativity of gender.
Yes.
In relationship to gender, in relationship to being, a woman, that is this particular is this particular box.
Yes.
A prize, a doll, a Barbie, something,
Yes.
something like that. Yeah.
I had someone I know. I won't say the context of which I know them, and I know that I've known them for years. Who is a well known preacher, um, who I've known for at this point for probably 30 years. And I remember learning from a colleague that he and his wife had divorced, and I'd known his wife just as long. And what was described to me, I'm like, wow, like I mean, all kinds of stuff can happen in people's relationship. But the way that this woman described it to me was that, yeah, he wanted Mrs. Obama, he wanted her to be Michelle, and she just really wasn't, and wanted her, sleeveless dress, kind of whatever kind of thing, and she just kind of really wasn't interested in playing that part, in playing that role, anymore. And again, there's my periphery to the inside of the interiority, of it, but still having an understanding of that particular dynamism and those dynamics, around that, and what that, without even having had a conversation. That's not pretending that I know them or know the interior of their relationship that way, but knowing the tropes was an interesting thing for me. And that's just like also too about the mime, like what that meant about the performativity
Yes.
of mime, just in terms of like there's a power of that mime has in terms of its wordlessness, but that mime is still a language, in this way. But that, like he's talking about that, but it being reduced, that powerful medium being reduced to a sideshow on the basis
Yes.
of its elements of costumery, and this just and being made abject because of its and advantage being taken on the basis of its structure in terms of its wordlessness, when in a milieu where everything is about being able to speak and who has the mic.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
that being
Yes.
very, and I think that like literal, I mean, they were playing with that in the story, but also too, like what you're saying about that in the literal, in church, in institutional spaces, that's the purpose, like
Yes.
that's the purpose of it, about the people who are doing it not being able to, having something put on top of them, but them not actually being able to speak to it or to
That's right.
inform the message as such.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in all of those, like that whole like last third of the film, all these scenes that are happening on the side of the road there, because you're getting, we talked about it a little bit before with Lee Curtis. He's rehearsing the sermon outside, and then he meets up with the Atlanta penitentiary inmate, comes Montarius West, and he meets him, and it feels like the most authentic moment we really ever get with Lee Curtis. This feels like the most humanizing of him, I think, moment in the film. It feels like it adds complexity to the nature, I think, of the church, the black church, scandals that happen in the black church, preachers who do wrong or preachers who abuse power in the church, because there's always those little moments where you can go, but there was a good moment, or there was a seed that was planted with somebody, or this person was encouraged by the work that you were doing and does see your ministry as legitimate. Of course, he's an inmate.
Right.
So it's, is that also like undoing even the positivity of what he's saying, because he can't even, be in society and improve his life right now. Right now he's serving time, so there's all of that complexity. You're also getting Trinity before she puts on the clown makeup, the confrontation with the sister and the baby, and she's calling them all nasty, and it ends in some good fuck yous. God bless. Probably my favorite moment in the movie.
And what I think that also, what also I was getting out of that too is that there's that moment in that woman's public relationship to them, but also in these ways where the container of her own experience with possibly any number of microcosmic instances of churches and people like that. Because it's like there's something, like you said, about the camera too, and about that is like what we're hearing from her, that all of that is not about Lee Curtis. I think there's certainly absolutely the visceral in the moment, and also like if they've been watching him for whatever, or might have come to the church, but there was something else, and there was some other that, for me anyway, there were some other actors that were present that were a part of that of the royal that led up to that explosion, if you will, of a moment, and that and also the interior of the God bless, too, in the whole, in the way we understand that as a fuck you and a curse.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
so, and there is, like you said, like the moments of some good, and there's a space where even though that Trinity is relative powerlessness in that moment, recognizes the trauma. That there is certainly a piece of her that recognizes the trauma in that this woman is expressing, that's parallel to her own.
Yes.
And the ways that the two of them deflate each other, that was also something I really noticed with this last rewatching, because here she is, she's doing the shopping spree at the, what's the name of the hat shop, Bathsheba's Bonnets. Bathsheba's Bonnets. She buys, looking at all these fancy, beautiful church hats, beautiful, I guess that's subjective. Brings one, buys one, and he's like tearing it down. He thinks it's old. He thinks it's, just totally cutting her down. And then she turns around and does it with his sermon. Here he is, he's rehearsing the sermon outside. We have this moment of, maybe there are some layers under there. Maybe he is recognizing, at the very least, that he is someone in turmoil, someone who is fallible, someone who has faults, might be capable of harm. And he's like presenting it then, on the pulpit, the same sermon. There's issues with what he's saying, but there's some authenticity there. And she just goes, it doesn't ring. We need to practice it, make it more convincing, and just the nature of them together, making it such that they will never be able to be anything but this to the world, never be able to do ministry in any other way but this, because of their power dynamic. And of course, that's all happening, I think, right before she goes and talks to her mother.
Oh my God.
And that scene, you want to talk about that, Tim?
Just that I've heard that conversation between mothers and preachers' wives before. I have totally heard that. So it,
suck it up. What you complaining for? Take it to God. Keep it pushing.
Wait, Savannah, he a good man. We've seen it in movies, but I've seen it in real life. I mean, that is very much what preachers' wives experience from their mothers much of the time.
How could she be anything else? How could she navigate this any other way if this is her template?
Trapped from every end
that she's looking at.
Trapped. In a sense, because you could do the radical thing and blow it all up, which we suspect she might actually do.
Might. Or kill him.
Well, that's what I mean.
Kind of.
That's what I mean. I'm sorry. I just did the Jane Fonda face.
Yeah. It didn't just make me like, there was a space where like of sad for her in this other way, but then this other space, like just that last shot and her eyes and her face, and that last shot just made me go, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, this is like, and I think just as a piece of filmmaking, just like what, like house, like, the cliche is, it's not what you show, but it's what you don't, a lot of times. And that scene, that was just like, it was letting the audience, letting the audience's mind run, make up the rest of what happens next, that you wanted to be an after credit sequence.
Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes.
That you wanted to, but how at the same time, just like the brilliance of that as a piece of filmmaking, how that would have been facile to do that and easy, to do that, to cap it that way, as opposed to, because the possibility is that they could be together for
totally
forever. until one of
Yeah.
them expires. That could have went either way,
Totally.
So or
They could be facing violence. I mean, even that moment of the car in the parking lot doing the
Yeah.
donuts. I'm like, is somebody about to go in and
Right,
start
yeah.
something? Who knows? Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I say it could have been nothing happened. It could have been that he got off, or it could have been any number of things in between. Between that, but I think that was important to let because what most often happens, I think, is the multiplicity of in betweens.
Yes.
What happens a lot of times. And that's just because, and again, go back to the notion of power. It's just like about what is my life without not just this set of economic resources in the relative, but what is my life? What does this mean for me to leave this larger,
Yes.
community, and having had that conversation with, like, I mean, that my own experience of having left a community, but what but without the intensity of that, like of people I know who were queer, who left not just a natal community, but a religious community.
Yes.
At
Yes.
the same time, to have done that at the same time, and what that meant for, what that meant for them, and the difference in my experience, and that was how my experience was very much encapsulated and by a particular political and cultural popular moment, as opposed to something with a notion of antiquitousness, if you will, in people's relationship to a religious community, be it that, like, be that Abrahamic or whatever, that
Yes.
is, what that means to leave a community in that way, and what you are betraying if you question the power or the place of that community, what that means
That's right.
for somebody.
That's
you know,
right.
what that means for somebody, in a way that was never going to mean that for me, in my experience, in my personal experience.
I have one last question, but before I ask it, I do just want to know one other thing that I find really great about this film. Is that oftentimes when you get these kinds of stories or films about hinting at a closeted pastor or someone doing things, DL, whatever, you rarely also get gay characters who seem well adjusted. And I appreciate the sound recorder, who is out. I believe he's played by an out actor, Deveray Rogers. And same with the actor that plays Khalil, one of the accusers, the victim of Lee Curtis. He's played by Austin Crute, who's also an out actor. And I just appreciate the elements of that at least kind of show that alternative piece that feels important, and it helps kind of ground the film in a way that isn't like we have to be stuck here or stuck in the conversation of people who do wrong, and it can never be resolved, it can never be reconciled, you can never be well adjusted, you can never be, it's always going to be this trauma, it's always going to be this battle with faith or Christianity. And here are some, I do think the character of Khalil's probably still got work ahead of him, but there's at least some moments there throughout the film that feel expanded and move the conversation forward, which I appreciate.
I think that's important for people, one, who are problematized by the film, but also people who are validated, who be validated by the film. It's just the idea of, like, how often you don't get to see that depiction of, like it'd be important to see that depiction of struggle, of trauma, and struggle with the complex, so to speak, but also the idea that it is possible, like, to see, a depiction of well-adjusted and resistant and boundaried Black queer sexuality, as exemplified by the camera, guy.
My boyfriend likes my scruff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave. We're not doing this. No. Yeah.
You're right. Exactly. Like, to see that as demonstration. I think about that, about, like, when, this is, like, again, like in my work, like having worked in HIV services forever and working with young people, especially, and having people who I had, like, come. I remember having a young man come in once to say, who's basically said that what like enjoyed his experience, enjoyed the context of, his experience and getting the health information that he needed. But he closed by saying, and it just stuck with me, this has been 15 years, now. He says that like, I just want to go somewhere in community. He was maybe 20 years old. He said, I just want to go somewhere in community where old men aren't trying to fuck me all the time. And I was just like, I just had to sit. And it's just like, when I say it now, it makes me, it makes me tight behind the eyes in a particular kind of way. There's a way that it like, I wonder about him. I wonder about so many of the like, cause I know it from just from talking, he was coming about and talking about his experience in public. And he was talking about his experience in a church, in church spaces, too, as well. But it was just like to hear that, that particular way. And this is part about being older, too, is just that like, and still seeing and watching that and being like, yeah, bro, I hear, I hear you, and thinking about just personally the way that there was so much of that I escaped. And some people in my community did not, but there was a lot of it that I just did not experience, and I just did not escape because of the angles of dynamics of community. But that was a thing for me to watch and a thing for me to see, and just in terms of my perception of what would like thinking about what I know, like that I now know and understand what was happening structurally and it's still happening.
Yes.
For people.
Yeah.
That's really kind of that's heartbreaking and intense, but that was healing in a way, I think, just about the idea of that it is possible.
Yes.
It is possible for somebody to get where they need to go and to get out, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah.
Metaphorically and literally.
Yes.
Yes. So we talked earlier about the usage of hip hop in this film. I guess my last question, other than, just any last thoughts y'all have about the movie, is the usage of gospel music in this film. It's not a lot. It kind of tickles me in watching newer films how far back they're willing to go in terms of gospel history. And so we get Never Would Have Made It as kind of the big moment in the film, which is kind of fitting because, I mean, other than Mary Mary and Kurt Franklin, Never Would Have Made It is probably the biggest song of the 21st century, gospel song. You rarely get gospel placements in mainstream films, Hollywood films.
Yeah.
So here's the moment where they get that. And it's fascinating to me. And then I think at the very end of the film, you get Let the Praise Begin, Fred Hammond, right after this final, close-up shot of Trinity. Is she going to kill him? Is she not? Black Jesus, what's going on? That's menacing. Is this a horror film after all? Credits, Let the Praise Begin. Tim, do you have any thoughts about these placements and why? And
well,
it's all very ironic to me. I don't know, but go ahead. What are you thinking?
Well, I think for this generation, that is traditional music. That's that's what they think traditional gospel is. And, the only other real moment we get is the faux church Holy Ghost scene. And which also felt
the organist, the one of the devout five, she's the organist, right? Yeah,
which did not feel out of line with me with what the contemporary church thinks they have when they have their praise breaks, what they call now, because and so that's, to me, even in real church, it's a caricature today of what it used to be. It is just mimicry. I watched a service last night and, folks, and there was even a comment in there that folks just do not get overtaken anymore by the Spirit because you've got, 2 generations now of people that have no relationship with it in that context. So, they're going to dance in advance, but it's very conscious and they're not overtaken. And so I think they did a great job of capturing what it is now. It's sterile, it's lifeless, it's detached, and performative.
That's my last thought, about that, like when I go, and that's going back to what I was saying about the notion of the megachurch, the notion of the Black megachurch, and the change in technology, and the way that the presence of the camera changes. It's like, not if anyone is necessarily watching, but if we even think somebody is, if we even think somebody is watching, how that changes the shape of what, not just what we do, but what we're going to see, and the idea of, and I think that also too, what it makes me, because it's like, because now there's a zillion cameras, and then there's a, and they're streaming everything, and there's always a camera on something.
Yep.
I think that what the movie overall plays with is the notion of control, that you just don't,
Yes.
that just does not exist
That's right.
anymore. It being one thing to have, because like you can have a documentary, and it, like you could be completely focused on the documentary filmmaker in that moment, and the way that they both were. But it's like the little girl is a documentary, is potentially what is somebody with a cell phone.
Yes.
Potentially
Yeah.
any number of people potentially documenting and uploading, that moment. And
That's right.
and is that, and that is not as a conversation. I mean, I think that's a part of the conversation, but it's just interesting to think about when you're placing yourself and watching that world, thinking about like what is happening. So like, okay, the documentary happened, but what happened with the B-roll that everybody else in the parking lot was making when the car was turning donuts, or when the screaming was going on?
Right.
Like there's this is a recursion of documentaries inside, inside that, and different angles of the conversation potentially in that particular universe that is happening. So that's just that was the sprawl that I went into too, like at the end of the movie, not just of what she was going to do, but like, okay, what else, is there? Because it used to be just like, I mean, if it was 1989 and Jim and Tammy Faye, it was just CNN, it was just
That's right.
whatever cable. There wasn't any way for anybody to disseminate what was happening, because it's like, because somebody could stop you, because if you were doing it then, it was like on your shoulder,
Yep. Yep.
whereas now it's like,
Yeah.
it's Google glasses that you could be
That's
doing
right.
that with, and nobody would
That's
have any
right.
idea that you were doing
Right.
it. So the dynamics have completely changed with regard to the technology, but that was something but they were so caught up in their thing that they could not even acknowledge that
Yes.
that was, that like, okay,
And what totally embodies that moment, or embodies that in the film, there's this moment when Trinity's on the side of the road before she's in the clown makeup, and this little girl comes up, and this is not documentary because the aspect ratio changes. And this girl comes up, she's like popping gum, blowing bubbles, I think, and she walks up to her and she's holding a phone, and it's not clear, at least not to me, whether or not this girl is recording her. But she's holding the phone, and she's like, you having a blessed day, sweetie? And she doesn't say anything to her at all. She's just staring at her, popping her gum, and then walks away. And it's like, yeah, it's bubble bursting, because we don't know. What's this little girl think of this girl?
Yeah.
Is she going to take this film and put it somewhere? If
Right.
she's recording, is she not? All of that. So who do we recommend this film to? Do we recommend it to everybody?
I reckon
I think we all like it. We all have basically said, like, this is a film to watch multiple times. So
I would recommend it to
Yeah.
anybody. I would recommend it to anybody. It's a view into a world that you just would not be familiar with. And I mean, and it's just like, and it generates a lot. Even if it's just that you just don't know that planet, the texture of it for me is that it pops and creates interesting questions and interesting points of interrogation. So it's like, if you're deeply familiar with Black American church, if you're not, or if you're just like, if you're from a relatively secular, community, I think that there's something here that's interesting, just as terms of a conversation about a particular piece of culture, but also about, I mean, the same way that you would watch the documentary about Jonestown.
That's right.
And that, like, for example, and how you might have ideas about, like, I remember just even as my dad, who turns 88, this year, asking me, because I can't recall how we got to talking about that, because I think I was working on a song that was using clips of Powers Booth as Jim Jones. And I think that what it was, and he asked me, he said, how does that happen? Because there's a particular distance for him living in Chicago for the last 60 odd years, and what happened in San Francisco in the 70s. There's a way that there's a lot of distance from that to people, if you're not familiar, or you're regionally not, if you weren't a part of that or weren't around when that was happening. And he asked me, how does something like that happen? I said, how does anything happen?
That's
I
right.
said, how did the UNIA happen? The American African Communities League happen? How did Father Divine happen? You know, how did
Yes.
the Nation of Islam, you know, happen? How does any other cult of cult of personality where you have those kind of abuses, the Sullivanians, you know, who I was reading about the other day. I mean, you could just go on and on. The Church of Scientology, you just go on and on and on about that. How do any of those things happen? Well, you want to know. This is a piece of that. If that's the question that you have. But I think there are any other number of questions that could be germinated for people that would be interesting and would be educational or edifying or both or more and more, you know, too. I think that with anybody watching it, if you're watching it and if you're watching it and paying attention, and if you watch it 15 times,
That's right.
too as well, that
Yeah.
you'll get to see more and more and more.
What
But
about
yeah.
you, Tim?
Yeah, and for anybody. I think it's for anybody because you'll see, as Juba said, the through line, because we can see this same cult of personality in politicians today,
Yes.
in influencers online, and everyday people who are obsessed with social media and how they're presenting themselves, even if they don't amass the following of like one of the major influencers. Everybody is aspiring these days to become that. And I think this film really articulates that thought process of presentation. And ultimately, you know, I think it should make all of us, anybody who watches it, the real question should be, what are my core values? What
Right.
do I believe in?
Yeah.
What do I believe about myself and who am I in the world? So I would say anybody should watch it and see how it
Yeah.
applies to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to the church folk who walked out or were turned off because of the word of mouth that they heard from other church folk, yeah, it's going to be shocking on that first watch because you're not used to seeing things that laid out. The reality is, it is reality. It is. And as outrageous as it seems, as comedic as a lot of the pieces are, not one piece of this have I not seen
Absolutely.
in the churches that I've been in over my 30 plus years of life. So
47 over here.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. 53 and not in the church, but I see. Yep. Like all going through the whole movie. Yep. 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 Yep.
yep, yep, yep,
Yep.
yep,
That right there. Yep. Yep. I saw that. Yep. Yep. Yep.
yeah. All right. Well, Juba, what do you have to plug? Tell everyone where they can find you, what you've got going on. You've got lots of things always
Yeah,
going on, so I want you to share all of it.
A big one is, and I talked to Tim about this a little bit, was that if those people who are familiar with the venerable Nomadic Press out of Oakland, Nomadic Press unfortunately went under, but J.K. Fowler and staff amazingly and gracefully migrated about 125 books, so 100 plus authors, to Black Lawrence Press in New York City. That's been an amazing experience. So my book is still in print, Son of Byford, and Black Lawrence Press is amazing and incredible, and Nomadic Press has been amazing, and that big love to JK and staff. So you can get Son of Byford at Black Lawrence Press. Additionally, my main music project right now is still Commando, which is the rap rock revisioning and revisitation project that the album came out on Kill Rock Stars. I've in short described it. People have described it as the love child of Bikini Kill, Pegging, Limp Bizkit. Is the best way that we can to get people in the park about what it is. But it's a lot of fun. It's black. It's queer, it's bisexual, it's trans, it's everything that you want, and it's you can dance to it, you can head nod to it. It's I've had an amazing time working on that project with everyone who's worked on that. Honey Mahogany being one of the people that people might know, who was one of the vocalists on that project. I'm in the studio. We're preparing to record the second album. Thinking about being dad, being granddad, and thinking about what can letting us see what comes next. I want to say thank you to both of you, because people ask me all the time. They're like, "What are you doing, working on? What are you getting out of this?" And I'm like, people still talk to me and still interested and ask me to come and say what I have to say, and think that what I have to say is valuable and is worth something, and something that people want to hear. So that's about my long long-term gratefulness about that, and hoping my ultimate motivation around what I do is about service. So if the words serve, if the experiences I have serve, and the way I can talk about that continues to serve and continue to be of use, that is what I'm going to keep doing, and that is what I love being able to do. So and y'all have been a part of that, and I appreciate the space, because everybody doesn't get the space. So I appreciate being able to get the space and continue to get space to do that. So thank you both for that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you, Juba. I mean, these conversations are always great.
And thank everybody who is listening. Thank you. Because and support independent media.
That's right.
Well, Tim, where can people find you?
Instagram and the Twitter and Facebook at Tim Dillinger. And you can subscribe to my weekly newsletter, God's Music is My Life, at Substack.
And you can find me, Ray Curenton, at Ray Curenton everywhere. Stream my music on all the streaming platforms. But more powerfully, you can support my music directly by going to Bandcamp at raycurenton.bandcamp.com. We'll include links to our stuff. We'll include links to Juba's stuff, all in the episode description.
Yep. Same thing here with me, Bandcamp and all of that kind of stuff. And Instagram, Juba Kalamka there. Commando sucks. Is Commando's Instagram. So
I love it.
I love that. All right, y'all.
Right on.